for months. I don't even talk about it anymore. It's too painful for me.
The 9,624th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in Libya. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Libya to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with the Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Mr. Karim Khan, Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Prosecutor Karim Khan.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, it's a great privilege to have the opportunity once again to brief the Security Council this morning. I would like to express my thanks to my brother, His Excellency, the Permanent Representative of Libya to the United Nations for his attendance. Mr. President, Excellencies, it was 2.5 years ago when I first had the opportunity to brief the Council in relation to the Libya situation. And in those remarks, through the lens of Libya, I called for what, in effect, was a paradigm shift, for a new and constructive new dynamic with this Council. I emphasized to all members of the Council on that day that I would prioritize referrals to the court made by the Security Council. I would do my utmost to ensure more resources were given to Security Council referred situation. And I also expressed the view that, in my respectful opinion, for too long, the situation in Libya and also Darfur had been allowed to drift. And I was committed to use my best efforts with the excellent colleagues that work in the office to change things, to bring a new dynamic, and to give impactful, credible results that we could show to the people of Libya, the victims in Libya, and also to the Security Council. And it was 6 months after that initial briefing that I outlined and presented a renewed strategy in relation to Libya. I detailed 4 key lines of inquiry that we would take forward in order to deliver meaningfully. And I set out publicly benchmarks that would be applied to our work so we could collectively measure progress being made towards justice and accountability and the rule of law. And we could also candidly discuss challenges that we could address together. It's my respectful view that over the last 18 months, we have indeed reinvigorated this work, and we have set a basis for the successful realization of the objectives I set out in the strategic vision I detailed in April 2022. And whilst, as an officer of the court, I am constrained in detailing all the progress that's been made, I can say that we have made strong progress in line with this renewed strategy. In the last 6 months alone, as reflected in the report that we've lodged with the Secretariat, the Libya Unified Team has completed 18 missions in 3 geographic areas. They have collected more than 800 pieces of evidence, including video and audio material. They've taken more than 30 statements, interview statements, screening statements, and we've made significant progress in relation to the 2014-2020 period in terms of alleged crimes in detention centres in that period. We've continued to provide concrete, tangible and meaningful support in relation to national proceedings involving crimes against migrants, and only in March, at the end of March, I hosted members of the Joint Investigative Team at headquarters in The Hague, in which we and the team further detailed how we could achieve synergies to make sure the crimes against these most vulnerable individuals are properly investigated and prosecuted. Our work is moving forward with increased speed and with a focus on trying to deliver on the legitimate expectations of the Council and on civilians, on the people of Libya. And today, in this, my 6th report to the Council, the 27th in total, I think that we have a landmark moment by announcing a roadmap in relation to what could be the completion of the investigative stage in terms of Resolution 1970. In presenting this roadmap that's detailed with greater specificity in the report, I want to be clear, we're not cutting and running, we're not finding a way to exit stage left, we're not gradually foreshadowing a curtailing of our work, a lack of focus, energy or vigour. We're not saying that we can't deliver. That's something I professionally cannot accept. It's something I think the Council should not and would not accept, because you have referred a very serious matter to the International Criminal Court under Chapter 7, realising that justice was essential for the people of Libya. Rather, the roadmap I have detailed in the report represents, I think, a genuine, a dynamic vision for the fulfilment of the mandate that you've entrusted to us. It details a focused set of activities that will implement, God willing, in the next 18 months and beyond, to significantly expand the impact of our action in the Libya situation. And the roadmap is a collective work. We are not the only operator on the international level. We have to work shoulder to shoulder with the authorities in Libya, with the Council, with all state parties. And there are positives. Only last month, my Deputy Prosecutor, Nazat Shamim, the Deputy Prosecutor of the Court with responsibility for the Libya situation, had a successful mission to Tripoli, had a productive meeting with the Attorney General, and also met with different civil society actors in Tripoli and also in Tunis. In the last reporting period, more than 25 such engagements between my office and civil society organisation, Libyan civil society in particular, have taken place. And we've also continued dialogue with the Council through working level briefings last month, outlining and trying to flesh out and give more details as to the proposed roadmap. And based upon that, I present respectfully 2 key phases that are detailed in the written document. The first is the intention, the hope, the target to complete the investigative stage from now and by the end of 2025. That's the investigative stage of the situation. Of course, it's not going to be easy. It's going to require cooperation, candour, a can-do attitude from my office, but also from the authorities in Libya. But that period hopefully will give rise to even more additional applications for warrants of arrest and also greater support by my office to national proceedings in Libya. Complementarity is a foundation of the Rome Statute, but burden sharing is linked to that principle of complementarity, trying to understand from the Libyan colleagues, the Libyan Attorney General, where their problems are, and trying to forge ahead with this principle that the rule of law can be effective and must be applied equally. In addition, and linked to that, we hope and again, it requires work, it requires focus, but we have trying to improve and reinvigorate our approach to fugitive tracking, to arrests, and with the help of registry colleagues, the aim would be to give effect to arrest warrants and to have at least initial proceedings start before the court in relation to at least one warrant by the end of next year. The second part is judicial and complementarity, because following, if that goes to plan, following the end of 2025, we want to move posture and try to help and support Libya. That can start now. Technical assistance, burden sharing, trainings, know-how, use of artificial intelligence, technology, and technical skills of building these types of cases, and focus, again, with Libyan colleagues on arrest and tracking. And in parallel to all of that, we want to deepen, on every level, our relationship with the Libyan authorities under complementarity. It can't just be with the Attorney General and the Deputy Prosecutor or with myself and other individuals. It needs to penetrate all strata of Libyan authorities, and they should know that they have in the Office of Prosecutor men and women that are not driven by any political imperative or interest, but are really trying to give life and give purpose to the principle of equality before the law and the value of the lives that have been lost in Libya to date. Crucially, the roadmap, I think, is something that the victims of Libya can look to as not hot air, not spin, but something impactful and meaningful to advance their right to justice. And I think it presents an opportunity to meaningfully deliver on Resolution 1970 that you passed in 2011. But that is not a given, because we need continued increased support from Libya. We need to walk shoulder to shoulder together, not for our own individual interest or the interests of the ICC or for a government, but for the interests of humanity and the people of Libya. And I think recently we've had very positive news. Multiple entry visas have been issued by the Libyan authorities. That allowed my deputy prosecutor to go last month. There was missions also in December last year. Forensic experts also went last year. The meeting between Deputy Prosecutor Nazat Shamim Khan and His Excellency Al-Sadiq Al-Saud, the Attorney General, I think was extremely important, particularly with regard to burden sharing and being candid in terms of what we can do and the mutual roles of the authorities and the ICC, and starting and deepening a dialogue that will strengthen not only the rule of law, but hopefully we can work and help strengthen together the Attorney General's office as well, if that is something the Libyan Authority wish to avail themselves of, that cooperation and technical assistance. We anticipate in the next period there will be further missions between members of my office to Tripoli. I think there's enthusiasm, I don't think that's pitching it too high, of our opening an office in Tripoli. I think that will help complementarity, will help the investigations, it will help the discharge of Resolution 1970 and the Rome Statute obligations. And so plenty of positive news, given what I said previously on the difficulties caused by the lack of visas. In addition to the meeting with the Attorney General, it's only right, Mr. President, if I can also applaud and thank positively His Excellency Mr. Zayed SS Darim, the Ambassador of Libya to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I think his arrival has ushered in also increased candor, partnership and dialogue that is being felt in terms of the cooperation, and I wish to applaud him and the Libyan authorities for that change. But to march forward, it does require solutions, not problems to every solution that is presented. This is a choice, it's a mindset also, from my office and from the Libyans, The world is very imperfect. The law has some fundamental requirements that can't be airbrushed away or diluted, but it can be a solution to problems that exist. And in my first briefing to the Council on this situation, I hoped, I prayed, I intimated that there was an opportunity that if a cause could unite this Council, naively perhaps, but I believed and hoped it would be the cause of international criminal justice. Which state is in favor of genocide, war crimes, or crimes against humanity? Which state doesn't want to be a protector of the vulnerable? Which state does not want to be on the side of legality and against the kinds of violations that we see in so many parts of the world? And notwithstanding all the difficulties that surround us in a very often dysfunctional world, a world in which too many people feel exposed to the elements, I still think this presents an opportunity if we work together, if we realize that continuing business as usual will lead us to the abyss and beyond, to do the right thing and look at people that have little shelter, that have suffered enormously for many different reasons, and that the rule of law must count for them. So a paradigm shift is still needed. It's not going to be achieved by words or a strategy or a roadmap. It's something that we all individually as states, as the Council and as Libya and my office, we have to really try to be servants of something bigger than ourselves. If we can allow the law to breathe at this moment, if we can recognize that different states and different interests have certain situations that are politically difficult for them, but realize that there is value in an international criminal court that is not part of the political discourse, but is trying and endeavoring to be blind to the noise, deaf to the noise, but applying something that should be pristine and valuable, which is a yardstick of human conduct that should bind us all to keep us away from that abyss that I mentioned. It could yet be a moment of reawakening to change direction, because otherwise, when one looks at Libya, when one looks at other situations in the world, whether it's Ukraine or whether it's Palestine or whether it's the Rohingya or whether it's any other place one wishes to look at, we see issues. And so this is the time, I think, for the law to be allowed to breathe, as the Council has found, as a precondition for stability and international peace and security, which are direct responsibilities of the Council. To do that, Mr. President, we need to understand that the Rome Statute, the Geneva Conventions, customary international law, and the UN Charter are part of the tapestry of civilization that will allow us to survive this present inclement weather, this present perilous moment that we're facing, if we are real and sincere that every human life matters equally. The rule of law must apply in Libya as it must in every other situation. We can only do that with your help, your support, your solidarity for something otherwise that can be rendered irrelevant, but something that can't, and that is the law. So, Mr. President, thank you so much for the opportunity. I always remain ready and willing to engage with the Libyan authorities and also this Council. Thank you.
I thank Prosecutor Khan for his important briefing. I now give the floor to those Council members who wish to make statements. I will give the floor to the representative of Switzerland. You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, la Suisse...
Mr. President, Switzerland would like to thank the prosecutor for his briefing and for presenting his 27th report on the situation in Libya, pursuant to the mandate included in Security Council Resolution 1970. This report is of particular importance as it addresses not only the progress made in recent months, but also future prospects, notably by proposing a roadmap for the completion of the office's investigative activities on the situation in Libya. Allow me to highlight 3 points. First, the steady and significant progress made in implementing the renewed action strategy are important milestones on the road to accountability in Libya. Switzerland notes with interest the progress made in the 4 lines of inquiry. The progress made in the collection and analysis of evidence concerning crimes committed in detention centers, as well as the assistance provided to third-party states in their national trials relating to crimes against migrants, deserve particular mention. We also appreciate the emphasis placed on psychosocial support for victims and medical and security assistance for witnesses in collaboration with local authorities. Secondly, the development of a roadmap to complete the investigation phase testifies to the Bureau's to the Office's commitment to pursuing its activities with clear and precise objectives. It is nevertheless essential that the implementation of any completion strategy be closely consulted on with all stakeholders, including victims and survivors. We note that planning for the completion of investigations does not mean a reduction in the Office's activities, but rather an intensification of investigative efforts. In this regard, we welcome and encourage the efforts undertaken by the Office to strengthen collaboration with the Libyan authorities according to the principle of complementarity, including beyond the investigation period. Thirdly, cooperation is key to enabling the court to fulfill its mandate. We take note of the granting of visas and the various visits and substantive exchanges that took place during the period under consideration with the Libyan authorities, and in particular with the Libyan Prosecutor General. We hope to see a continuation of efforts in this direction pursuant to Resolution 1970. We welcome the Office's extensive cooperation with third-party states, particularly with regard to crimes against migrants. We also stress the importance of effective and useful collaboration with civil society, affected communities, and victims. We reiterate our grave concern about the restrictions imposed on civil society in Libya. Mr. President, the court can only fulfill the mandate we have entrusted to it if it enjoys strong support. We reaffirm our unconditional support for the court as an independent and impartial judicial institution and pledge that we will continue to implement our cooperation obligations under the Rome Statute. We reiterate our commitment to uphold and defend the principles and values enshrined in the Rome Statute and to preserve the integrity of the court, undeterred by any express threats or measures taken against it, its officials, and those who cooperate with it. We call on states to refrain from exerting any form of pressure and insist that all attempts to obstruct, intimidate, or unduly influence court officials must cease immediately. We recall that such attacks on the administration of justice are prohibited by the Rome Statute. By fulfilling its mandate, the court makes an important contribution to lasting peace and reconciliation. It is our common responsibility to ensure that it can effectively deliver justice. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Prosecutor Khan for briefing us on his 6th and 27th in total report on the situation in Libya. I also welcome Ambassador El Soni, permanent representative of Libya, to today's meeting. It has been 13 years since this Council referred this case to the ICC. The court has engaged in investigations not only with regard to the 2011 violence, but also on issues with detention facilities, crimes related to the 2014-2020 operations, and crimes against migrants under the mandate of Resolution 1970. Japan appreciates these investigative efforts by the ICC and supports the prosecutor's belief that these efforts should not be viewed as never-ending stories. Realizing the objectives of the mandate set by the Security Council is critically important in the current international political landscape. In this regard, Japan welcomes the roadmap towards completion of the investigative phase in relation to the situation in Libya. We take note that the roadmap includes a significant activity plan for the next 18 months, including the ICC's intensified support for multiple prosecutions in domestic courts. We would also like to highlight that this roadmap also covers the court's continuing role in the judicial and complementary phases even after the completion of the investigation at the end of 2025. At the same time, we would like to recall that the humanitarian and human rights situation in Libya remain distressing amid rising instability in the region. The Security Council press statement issued earlier this month emphasized the importance of providing a safe environment for civil society organizations. In this context, it is important to ensure that the ICC works closely with affected communities and deepens partnership with state, civil society, and regional and international organizations during the process of completing the investigative phase in order to achieve accountability for the people in Libya. We also stress the critical importance of continued and substantial engagement with these groups, including victims, during the next phases of the judicial and complementary processes to realize justice, even given the political stalemate. With regard to procedure, since this is the very first case in which the Security Council will see the completion of the ICC investigative phase under the mandate given by the Council through a resolution, we recognize the need for the Council to consider appropriate action to reflect this transition. This may include consideration of the reporting requirements of the Prosecutor's Office after 2025. Before concluding, we would like to welcome the improved cooperation of the Libyan authorities as highlighted in the report, including the issuance of multiple entry visas and direct engagement with Libyan legal authorities. We also take note that the roadmap for completion was developed in consultation with the Libyan authorities and express our hope that cooperation and efforts for complementarity will improve as laid out in the roadmap. The successful completion of the investigative phase should serve to improve justice under the rule of law and push forward the fight against impunity. As Prosecutor concluded his briefings, rule of law must apply in Libya as well as elsewhere in the world. Japan always stands ready to support the court to fulfill its critical role. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Japan for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by thanking Prosecutor Khan for his briefing today on his office's 27th report on the situation in Libya. The United Kingdom reiterates our support to the ongoing investigation and welcomes the Prosecutor's latest report to the Council. The UK was pleased to read in the report of the progress made in the investigation during this reporting period. We note, in particular, the large number of missions and the extended fieldwork carried out by the Office over the past 6 months. We especially welcome Deputy Prosecutor Nazat Shamim Khan's visit to Tripoli and Tunis in April of this year to engage with victims' groups directly. We also welcome the publication of the roadmap. This outlines a clear pathway for the completion of the investigative phase. We were pleased to read in the report that the Office has actively sought input from civil society partners, victims and their representatives, and given their views consideration during the development of the roadmap. In order to achieve the objectives set out in the roadmap, we agree with the Prosecutor that active cooperation from the Libyan authorities will remain necessary. We therefore welcome the news that cooperation and collaboration with Libya has increased significantly during this reporting period. It is clear that sustained cooperation will be required in order to support the completion of the investigative phase by the end of 2025 and to ensure success thereafter. We were also pleased to hear today of the plan for the establishment of a liaison office in Tripoli. We hope this will support the transition from the investigative phase, facilitate further information sharing and further consolidate the partnership between Libya and the Office of the Prosecutor. Mr President, in conclusion, we reiterate the UK's continued commitment to work with the Office of the Prosecutor and urge them, along with the Libyan authorities, UNSMIL and others, to build on the progress made in order to deliver justice for the people of Libya. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for their statement. I will now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Prosecutor Khan, for your briefing to the Security Council on the Office of the Prosecutor's work on the situation in Libya. The International Criminal Court has an important role to play in the international system of justice, and the work of the ICC in Libya supports our collective pursuit of accountability, peace, and security. The United States commends the extraordinary dedication of the court's staff and the sustained efforts to investigate and prosecute those most responsible for the heinous atrocities committed against the Libyan people and individuals who find themselves on Libyan territory since February 2011. The prosecutor's most recent report to the Council reflects considerable progress in the past 6 months. The investigative and cooperative activities undertaken by the Office of the Prosecutor, including conducting numerous missions to Libya, accelerating its engagement with national authorities, and deepening its engagement with civil society partners, have enhanced the foundations for accountability in the face of ongoing challenges in Libya and a difficult operating environment. We congratulate you on the increase in momentum around investigations into the 4 priority areas of inquiry, on the Office's development of a rigorous process for prioritization, on preparations underway towards seeking additional arrest warrants, and on efforts to commence trial proceedings expeditiously. The acceleration of these activities is all the more important as the Office is concluding the investigative phase as part of the implementation of the ICC's Libya strategy and roadmap. We call on Libyan authorities to do more to support and advance global accountability efforts and to enhance cooperation with the ICC, including in ensuring that all those subject to arrest warrants face justice as soon as possible. Former senior officials of the Gaddafi regime, such as Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, who is still subject to an ICC arrest warrant on charges of crimes against humanity, must face justice. The United States also recognizes with gratitude the engagement between the Libyan authorities and the ICC in cooperation and promoting complementarity pursuant to the 2-track approach identified in the OTP's recent policy paper on complementarity and cooperation. We urge Libya's continued cooperation in keeping with Resolution 1970 in all aspects of the current investigations, including the issuance of visas to facilitate field work, iterative engagements with senior Libyan officials and technical experts, and establishment of a field office in Tripoli. We also encourage ongoing collaboration, collective investigative activities via the joint team, and 2-way information sharing with other national authorities focused on crimes committed in Libya, particularly those affecting migrants, an area of concern emphasized by the Council in Resolutions 2647, 2702, and 2698. we recognize the importance of this work continuing in parallel with proceedings before the court and beyond. The United States also commends civil society and survivor engagement and the commitment of your office to implementing trauma-informed approaches. The United States welcomes the increased contact with victims and civil society organizations in Libya as crucial to the delivery of justice for victims who have waited far too long to be heard. Victims and survivors deserve justice, which can be a powerful, stabilizing force for Libya's future. We particularly appreciate the emphasis on empowering victims and survivors and on witness protection, including the provision of psychosocial support, which must be paramount during and beyond the trial proceedings. We also encourage organs of the court to ensure greater transparency and participation for victims and the affected communities in its work. We continue to believe that resolving political uncertainty and promoting accountability will go a long way towards addressing the chronic instability in Libya, including the mobilization of armed groups. Human rights violations and abuses will continue unless meaningful steps are taken to resolve these issues and promote accountability. A critical step towards peace and stability is the withdrawal of all armed groups and mercenaries from Libya without further delay, in line with Security Council Resolution 2656 and the October 2020 Libyan ceasefire agreement. The people of Libya deserve stability and justice, and we support the International Criminal Court's effort to help bring justice to the people of Libya. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, I would like to thank the prosecutor of the National Criminal Court, Mr. Khan, for his briefing and his report. I would also like to thank him for his appeal to the Security Council, for his appeal that the rule of law, the international humanitarian law, and the international law apply to all cases, to every situation on our agenda. Erosion of compliance with the rule of law is putting in question not only the relevance of the Security Council, but the international order built with the UN Charter and international law at its center. So this is something I think that we should all continue to reflect on. Mr. President, the situation in Libya is the second and, unfortunately, for now, also the last case referred by the Security Council to the ICC. With this referral, the Security Council confirmed that the most atrocious international crimes are a threat to international peace and security. For ensuring peace and security, accountability for international crimes and the fight against impunity are essential. Therefore, I will begin by expressing Slovenia's strong and unwavering support for the ICC and for the work of the prosecutor. We must do all we can to ensure the ICC is able to carry out its mandate independently and impartially, as well as without outside interference. Having said this, I would like now to make a few points regarding the latest 27 prosecutors' report on the situation in Libya. We welcome the progress made in the investigation in the latest reporting period, especially in relation to crimes in detention facilities and crimes related to the 2014 to 2020 operations. We especially welcome the significant engagement of the prosecutor with the victims' associations and civil society. A victim-centered approach and ensuring protection and comprehensive support empowers survivors and is extremely important for Libyans and for migrants who have suffered the most heinous crimes. We also welcome the efforts made by the prosecutor in the engagement with the Libyan authorities. We note positive developments and we encourage the Libyan authorities to carry on with concrete steps in ensuring continued and further improved cooperation with the prosecutor. As emphasized in the report, the completion of the investigative phase by the end of 2025 depends on cooperation from the Libyan side. We commend the efforts made by the prosecutor regarding cooperation with third states. We emphasize the importance of the cooperation with the joint team in investigating crimes against migrants, and we support the intention of the prosecutor to continue with such engagement beyond 2025. Mr. President, the prosecutor intends to complete the investigation on Libya's situation by the end of 2025. In this regard, we welcome the roadmap presented with two core phases, the investigative phase and the judicial and complementarity phase. We support the prosecutor's intention that after the completion of the investigation, his engagement with victims will not cease. Victims must not be forgotten, and we note the readiness of the Office of the Prosecutor to engage further with civil society and victims to address their concerns. Lastly, I would like to emphasize that for the Court and the Prosecutor to be able to carry out their mandates, it is necessary to ensure adequate financial and human resources. We will continue to support the call for additional resources across all situations, and in particular also with respect to the Libya situation. Mr. President, it has been 13 years since the Security Council deemed the situation in Libya a threat to international peace and security and referred it to the ICC. The investigation is now near completion, and the second, the judicial and complementarity phase, will begin, in line with the mandate of the Council. I will conclude by repeating that it is not possible to achieve lasting peace without justice. And to ensure justice, we will continue to support the impartiality and independence of the ICC. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci.
Thank you, President. On behalf of the French delegation, allow me to thank Prosecutor Karim Khan for his presentation of the 27th report to the Security Council of the United Nations in implementing Resolution 1970 of 2011, as well as his action plan with a view to achieving the investigation activities of the Prosecutor's Office of the ICC in Libya. Prosecutor, you can count upon France's continued support for the independent and impartial work of the International Criminal Court, which plays a crucial role in combating impunity for the most serious international crimes. It is one of France's priorities in diplomatic action, and we reaffirm our full support for the court and its personnel in accomplishing their mandates and activities. The Prosecutor's Office must be able to exercise its prerogatives without any outside pressure, hindrance or obstruction. President, France has welcomed the progress made in implementing the strategy of the Prosecutor's Office as presented in their 23rd report in 2022. Combating impunity for crimes committed in Libya will only be possible and effective with active cooperation between the court and Libyan national authorities. In this regard, France welcomes the efforts undertaken by the office to bolster and improve cooperation with Libyan authorities, including with the official visit of the Deputy Prosecutor Nazat Shamin Khan to Tripoli last month. We note the commitment of the Libyan authorities, who have issued multiple entry visas to certain court representatives. Full access to Libyan territory is an essential condition in implementing the mandate conferred by this Council upon the Court, pursuant to Resolution 1970. The most serious crimes committed in Libya since 2011 must all be subject to investigation and prosecutions, including the crimes committed by Daesh and crimes against migrants and refugees. We're concerned regarding the arbitrary detentions and the cases of inhumane detention conditions, including of migrants and refugees. The authorities in charge of detention centres involved must allow immediate access to observers and international investigators. Forced disappearances and sexual violence reported by the office are unacceptable. There must be no doubt about the fact that whoever incites or commits such crimes today is liable for prosecution. Combating trafficking in human beings is, of course, a priority for France. President, we welcome progress made by the Prosecutor's Office over the last 6 months in investigations, particularly the conduct of over 18 missions and the collection of over 800 pieces of evidence. We welcome the use of technical innovations, including the publicly accessible portal OTP link, which has enabled the Office to receive, over the last 6 months, 28 communications linked to the situation in Libya. Cooperation between the Prosecutor's Office and states, as well as with international and regional organisations, is precious, and we welcome in this regard the closer working relations with UNSMIL and the cooperation with Europol. Finally, we call upon the Prosecutor's Office to continue its efforts in cooperating with victims' groups and civil society organisations in Libya. France encourages the Prosecutor to ensure that victims will be consulted and associated with the implementation of the strategy to conclude their investigations in Libya. It is essential to continue to ensure that these victims can be exonerated by the International Criminal Court when these facts are recognised as constituting crimes pursuant to the Statute of Rome. President, France has noted the decision of the Prosecutor to conclude their investigations in Libya and to ensure a successful transition towards the judicial phase of its activities by the end of 2025. France welcomes the Office's plan of action, which intends to enter new requests for the issuance of arrest warrants in some of the priority cases for investigation defined in the strategy for the situation, to intensify efforts in terms of the arrest strategy, and to track fugitives and preserve evidence. My delegation would like to have the Prosecutor's opinion on their assessment of the level of cooperation by Libyan authorities, though, given that we regretted the difficulties encountered last November, including on the implementation of the principle of complementarity, whilst political stability is not effective in Libya. It would likewise be interesting for the Prosecutor to elaborate on the various changes with regard to the judicial phase, whose success depends on the arrest of fugitives. My delegation understands that following the closure of the investigation phase in 2025, the Prosecutor's Office does not intend to ask the pretrial chamber to issue further arrest warrants. President, allow me to conclude by recalling that France attaches great importance to the relaunch of a political process in Libya, which is respectful of human rights and of the rule of law. We are concerned by the increased repression against civil society and human rights defenders, and pressures upon judges and lawyers, which run counter to the respect for the rule of law and adversely affect the consolidation of democracy in Libya. France reiterates its support for United Nations action. This is essential to restore stability and unity in the country. We encourage all Libyan protagonists to engage in dialogue under the auspices of the United Nations, so as to achieve the formation of a new unified government which can lead the country towards free, transparent and inclusive legislative and presidential elections throughout the territory. Finally, the judicial action of the International Criminal Court and its results play a key role in achieving these objectives and ensuring lasting progress in this state. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Malta.
Thank you, President. And let me also thank Prosecutor Khan for the report and his briefing this morning. I also would like to welcome the permanent representative of Libya to this meeting. Accountability is essential for durable and sustainable peace. As Volker Turk, High Commissioner for Human Rights, said, and I quote, "We know that if impunity reigns, and if the facts are not told, and if the truth is not told, we will have grievances going on and on and on," close quote. This applies to all conflict situations. In this regard, Malta reiterates its support to the work of the International Criminal Court and the efforts of the Prosecutor and his office in pursuing justice for victims of the most horrific crimes. The ICC's work in relation to the Security Council's referral of the situation in Libya is critical for long-term peace and stability in the country. We commend the continued implementation of the ICC's renewed strategy, including in relation to events between 2014 and 2020, as well as the provision of concrete support to national proceedings. We also take note of the roadmap towards completion of the investigative phase by the end of 2025 and the objective of additional arrest warrants, fugitive tracking and the preservation of evidence. These will lead to the transition into the judicial phase of the court's activities. We underline that such endeavour to complete investigations should be sensitive towards victims' needs and their right to justice. President, Malta commends the positive momentum with respect to engagement with the Libyan authorities, including the recent visits of the office and the issuance of multiple entry visas. Such cooperation is essential, both in relation to the Court's roadmap and the implementation of complementarity activities with Libyan authorities. The proactive policy of cooperation by the Court with other states, regional organizations, and international partners enhances complementarity and is also essential to achieve the objectives of the mandate. Let me also recognize the deepening of engagement with civil society, including recent meetings of Deputy Prosecutor Nashat Shamim Khan with CSOs and victims groups in Tripoli and Tunis. We encourage the Office to maintain a meaningful consultative process in the road towards completion of investigations and after, a process that involved listening to the voices of victims, survivors, their families, and the affected communities. Moreover, as part of the cooperation with the Libyan authorities, we underline the importance of measures that protect civil society organizations to fully empower them to carry out their activities. We remain concerned with the incidents of sexual and gender-based crimes against migrants, crimes against children, enslavement, torture, arbitrary detention and killings. The Security Council and the international community must redouble efforts in support of Libya to ensure that alleged wrongdoers are held accountable. We call for effective, comprehensive and non-discriminatory psychosocial and health services for survivors and reiterate the importance that such services are age-appropriate, survivor-centred and gender-responsive. President, Malta acknowledges that continued assistance provided by UNSMIL to the Office and underlines the importance of this ongoing support in anticipation of increased field missions to Libya in the coming months ahead of the completion of the investigation phase. The situation in Libya continues to warrant the international community's focus and support. President, before concluding, let me reiterate the call of the Court on all states to respect the integrity and independence of the Court and to cooperate actively with its investigations. We underline the importance of its impartial work in combating impunity for atrocity crimes, which is ever more necessary in our world. If we do not address accountability, we will not end the cycles of violence which continue to inhibit our efforts towards peace and security. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Malta for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Mr. President, I listened attentively to the briefing provided by Prosecutor Karim Khan. I welcome the presence of the permanent representative of Libya, Ambassador El Soni, at today's meeting. China's position on the International Criminal Court's work in Libya remains unchanged. The case currently before the ICC was referred to the court in 2011. We take note of the roadmap for completion of the investigation phase outlined by the prosecutor. We hope that the ICC, in its work going forward, will strictly abide by the principle of complementarity enshrined in the Rome Statute, maintain an independent, objective, and impartial position, fully respect the judicial sovereignty and legitimate views of the countries concerned, and maintain close communication and cooperation with the Libyan authorities. Achieving peace and stability in Libya is a prerequisite for delivering judicial justice. The international community should uphold the principle of Libyan-led and Libyan-owned, respect the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity, support intra-Libya dialogue and consultation, promote political transition, and avoid imposing external solutions. The ICC, when carrying out its Libya-related activities, should contribute to strengthening solidarity and unity among the Libyans and avoid amplifying differences and tensions. China supports the punishment of the most serious international crimes for the maintenance of international peace and security. When confronted with major crises and challenges that are of great concern to the international community, the ICC should exercise its powers in accordance with the law, apply international law in an equal and consistent manner, avoid double standards and exceptionalism, and effectively safeguard international equity and justice. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Shukran, Sayyida Rais.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have listened with great interest to the briefing by the prosecutor of the ICC and have taken note of his report submitted to the Council pursuant to Resolution 1970, including the proposed roadmap for the continuation of its work. We welcome the participation of the permanent representative of Libya in this meeting. We reiterate that Algeria condemns all crimes regardless of their perpetrators or victims. We reiterate that the principle of accountability is a pillar for Algeria and should be a compass that guides the international community and the ICC when it comes to all crimes, regardless of where they are committed in the world. Our neighbor and our sisterly country, Libya, has for more than 13 years been going through instability that has exhausted the Libyan people and weakened Libyan institutions, both central and local institutions. What is taking place in Libya is a shared responsibility borne by all members of the international community, including those who have blessed and participated in conflicts of interest and pursuing their influence across Libyan territory. Instability in Libya has increased organized crime, particularly against irregular migrants who find themselves victims of human trafficking. There is a continued flow of arms in which several countries are involved, which is prolonging the crisis and the violence in Libya. These factors must be taken into account when we address the current situation in Libya and when we assess the situation in that country. First, in accordance with international law, states bear the primary responsibility when it comes to addressing crimes committed on their territory and ensuring accountability in accordance with their jurisdiction. This includes atrocity crimes and the most serious crimes. Accountability and prosecution for crimes are primarily the responsibility of Libyan authorities, which are engaged in doing just that and are cooperating fully with the ICC according to the report submitted to the Council. Secondly, constructive cooperation between Libya and the ICC is based on the principle of complementarity pursuant to the Rome Statute. We reiterate the importance of taking into account the concerns of Libyan authorities as well as their priorities and their needs. Third, technical criminal prosecution work is based on evidence. It must not be politicized if we want to ensure its success. We must abstain from any politicization when it comes to criminal trials, as well as make sure that no pressure is being put on authorities to ensure political gains. We also hope that the assistance provided by the members of the Council to the work of the ICC will also cover other issues in light of the threats that the court faces during its investigations into cases relating to crimes related to the Israeli occupation. We hope that the ICC will also take a serious approach to the situation in Gaza and the Palestinian territories. This is necessary in order for the ICC to demonstrate that it is not a tool used by some members of the international community to threaten whoever they want, whenever they want. We must emphasize the need to avoid any double standards in this sense. In conclusion, stabilizing the situation in Libya and finding a comprehensive solution is essential to overcome this impasse and in order to ensure justice, accountability, and make sure the rule of law prevails. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Prosecutor Karim Khan of the International Criminal Court for his comprehensive report and briefing on the situation in Libya. I also welcome the participation of the permanent representative of Libya in our meeting today. When the Council referred the situation in Libya to the court in 2011, nobody could have imagined that it would continue to receive disturbing reports of evidence pointing to widespread crimes against humanity in the country, even after a decade. As the International Organization for Migration has recently pointed out, at least 3,100 deaths and disappearances were recorded in 2023 along the Mediterranean migratory route under inhumane conditions. Moreover, more than 3,000 people are currently held in harsh detention centers with documented grave human rights violations. Reflecting these harsh realities, half of the prosecutor's key lines of inquiry into the Libyan situation are devoted to ongoing crimes against humanity, including crimes against migrants and violations in detention facilities. This underscores the continuing relevance of the Office of Prosecutor's work in restoring justice in Libya and promoting regional security. Expressing its appreciation for the efforts of the office in investigating the situation, I'd like to highlight the following points. First, the Republic of Korea welcomes the report from the prosecutor detailing improved cooperation from Libyan authorities. This cooperation has facilitated significant advances in all active investigations, ranging from evidence collection to supporting national criminal proceedings over the past 6 months. Korea urges the Libyan authorities to continue and enhance this cooperation so as to assist the court in ensuring accountability and upholding justice. Second, we also welcome the prosecutor's submission of a roadmap for the completion of the investigation phase by the end of 2025. If done successfully, the completion of the investigation would once again deliver the message to the world that no perpetrators of heinous crimes will be left with impunity. In this regard, we note that, as stated in the report, civil society partners assert that the investigation should extend beyond 2025, and we believe the concerns underlying this assertion should not be neglected. Therefore, we appreciate the prosecutor's sincere efforts to actively incorporate the perspectives of its civil society partners in refining its completion strategy to ensure that the mandate is fully realized. Third, while the Office of the Prosecutor's efforts remain vital in delivering justice to the Libyan people, it is equally crucial to adopt a comprehensive approach that addresses the root causes of the prevalent crimes against humanity. The continued inability to form a unified government has not only worsened the security landscape, but has also allowed human trafficking networks to thrive, exposing migrants and detainees to substantial risk. Given these circumstances, we strongly urge major political actors to engage sincerely to establish legitimate, unified governance across the country. We also encourage Operation Irini to continue its efforts in dismantling the criminal networks benefiting from human trafficking, thereby aiding the broader stabilization endeavors in Libya. Finally, we would like to reiterate the importance of the International Criminal Court's integrity, independence, and impartiality, which are fundamental to upholding justice and accountability in international law. As one of the principal contributors to the court, the Republic of Korea stands firm in its support and reaffirms its full confidence in the court's noble endeavors. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Mr. President, I thank the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Mr. Karim Khan, for his presentation of the 27th report of his office on the situation in Libya. I also welcome the participation of Ambassador Tahir Al-Soni, Permanent Representative of Libya, in today's meeting. Guyana welcomes the prosecutor's indication that significant landmarks were achieved in the discharge of the mandate of the office during the reporting period, despite challenges related to the complex political landscape and security situation in Libya and the resource constraints of the office. We have noted the office's assessment that there has been a significant increase in momentum in its investigation since the establishment of the renewed strategy in 2022. We also welcome the development of the roadmap towards completion of the investigative activities of the court by the end of 2025, noting that the roadmap was the result of extensive consultations with key stakeholders. It must be underscored that cooperation is essential to the work of the court in the investigative, prosecution, and judicial phases. We view as a positive the increased cooperation between the Libyan authorities and the Office of the Prosecutor, noting the willingness of the Libyan authorities to discuss engagement with the office beyond the investigative phase in the context of complementarity activities. The constructive engagement between the Deputy Prosecutor and Attorney General of Libya and the multiple entry visas recently issued are welcome. We urge continued cooperation in accordance with Resolution 1970. We have also noted the progress made with the investigations across key lines of inquiry, in particular the collection and analysis of evidence, and look forward to the commencement of the judicial phase. We express grave concern regarding crimes committed against migrants and stress that the rights of migrants must be fully respected. In this regard, the Office's support to domestic authorities in the investigation of crimes committed against migrants is critical. Mr. President, engagement with stakeholders is important to the court's work, particularly in the investigative activities. We commend the Office of the Prosecutor's strengthened engagement with victims and survivors, witnesses, affected communities, and civil society organizations. Turning to the security situation, this remains a cause for concern in light of its effects on the work of the court with its investigative activities. We encourage peace and call on the parties to continue to show restraint. Mr. President, Guyana recognizes the need for additional resources to support the work of the court. My delegation has been contributing and encourages others to do so. We also underscore the absolute necessity for the court, its officials, and those cooperating with it to be able to function free from threats and intimidation. In conclusion, I reaffirm Guyana's unwavering support for the International Criminal Court. Justice for victims and an end to impunity are central to the achievement of peace and security. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Mr. President, I thank Mr. Karim Khan, Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, for his informative and sobering briefing and for presenting the ICC Prosecutor's 27th report on the situation in Libya, as mandated by Security Council Resolution 1970. Sierra Leone commends the Prosecutor and his office for the unwavering commitment to transparency, international accountability, as well as for the diligent and consistent efforts of his office over the past 6 months on the Libya situation referral. I also welcome the participation of the permanent representative of Libya in this meeting. Mr. President, Sierra Leone reiterates its prioritization of accountability as a means to reinforce the protection of civilians in situations of armed conflict, respect for fundamental human rights, and to end impunity for atrocity crimes. On the Prosecutor's 27th report, we would like to emphasize the following 3 points. Firstly, we commend the Prosecutor's Office for their renewed investigative strategy outlined in April 2022 and welcome the roadmap to conclude the investigation phase in the Libya situation by 2025. The outlined roadmap for completion has the potential to achieve the mandate of the Security Council. We understand and acknowledge the importance of the activities of the Office of the Prosecutor and the need for them to continue over the next 18 months to achieve the desired outcomes. We also take note of the 2 critical phases outlined for the completion, the investigative phase from May 2024 to conclusion in 2025, and the judicial and complementary phase. We acknowledge the efforts of the OTP to secure additional warrants of arrest and the commitment to initiate at least 1 trial by the end of 2025. We anticipate the forthcoming implementation of these endeavors. Secondly, we commend the effort of the prosecutor and his team for implementing the court's renewed investigative strategy. Their work has shown significant progress, particularly in addressing crimes committed between 2014 and 2020, focusing on detention crimes and crimes against migrants, and providing support for victims and witnesses and their security. We are cognizant of the court's challenges in Libya, including the complex political landscape and the resource constraints. We therefore welcome the efforts of the OTP to enhance its role and engage with Libyan authorities and people through evidence collection, warrant issuance, and victim support. In this regard, Sierra Leone reaffirms its unwavering support for the court in pursuing justice and accountability in Libya. While welcoming the efforts made so far by the court, we emphasize the importance of upholding the court's impartiality and independence to enable it to carry out its mandate effectively. To this end, we call for the provision of adequate human and financial resources that are commensurate with the court's responsibility and functions. We reaffirm our unwavering dedication to uphold and defend the principles enshrined in the Rome Statute and ensuring the court's integrity remains steadfast despite increasing threat or action taken against it and those cooperating with it. Thirdly, cooperation plays a crucial role in the mandate fulfillment of the court. In welcoming the increased interaction and cooperation between the court and the Libyan authorities from the prosecutor's report, we urge that support for Libya's national capacity in victims support, investigations, and prosecution also be increased. We believe states should have a primary responsibility to deliver justice and accountability for their people. If they lack the capacity or resources, we encourage cooperation with international partners in this endeavor. In this regard, we affirm our support for the people of Libya in pursuing accountability and justice within the broader framework of the peace process. We reiterate the application of the principle of complementarity, emphasizing its integral role in combating heinous crimes and fostering bilateral engagement between the court, Libyan authorities, and also with neighboring states and civil society in Libya. We therefore welcome the ongoing cooperation between these entities. Furthermore, we call for increased regional and international support, especially in light of the complex and evolving political situation in Libya. In closing, Mr. President, Sierra Leone expresses deep concern over public statements made by state, elected, and other government officials relating to investigations being carried out in situations before the ICC. The statements are deeply regrettable and are seen as threats or attempts to undermine the independence, integrity, and impartiality of the court. We urge states to respect the independence and impartiality of the court, as we cannot afford to be selective on the important issue of accountability and the rule of law. Sierra Leone reaffirms its full support for the International Criminal Court. We assure the people of Libya of our support and reiterate our commitment to the principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity of state. Recognizing the importance of working together for justice, Sierra Leone is fully committed to continue playing an active role in this shared endeavor. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, President. I thank Mr. Karim Khan, the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, for presenting his report on the situation in Libya. And I welcome Libya's permanent representative to this meeting. My delegation is pleased to note that despite the political and security situations in Libya and the budgetary limitations upon the Prosecutor's Office, notable progress has been made in achieving the objectives of the renewed strategy presented 2 years ago. I underscore in this regard progress in various lines of investigation, particularly those linked to crimes in detention centres and against migrants, as well as compilation of evidence and issuance of arrest warrants, and the strengthening of commitments to groups of victims and civil society organisations. President, 13 years ago, the Security Council decided to refer the situation in Libya to the International Criminal Court. It is from this perspective that Ecuador welcomes with interest the roadmap presented by the prosecutor for the finalization of the investigation phase by the end of 2025 and the support activities which will take place after this date. The successful implementation of the roadmap, which we understand is the result of dialogues with all interested parties, will require intense interaction with national authorities upon the basis of the principle of complementarity. In this regard, my delegation welcomes the fact that the level of cooperation with Libyan authorities has significantly increased, and we trust that this dynamic will be further entrenched in the future. It's also necessary to maintain and step up coordination with third states and international agencies, whose potential to achieve positive results in the investigations has been demonstrated. Moreover, we encourage the Prosecutor's Office and other stakeholders to provide the technical cooperation which Libyan institutions require to bolster their national justice system. President, the presentation of the roadmap is a decisive milestone in this Council's involvement in Libya. Ecuador trusts that its implementation will contribute to national reconciliation by promoting the rule of law and combating impunity. Finally, I reiterate my country's support for the International Criminal Court and its commitment to the principles and values established in the Rome Statute. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Mr. President, the position of the Russian Federation regarding the unacceptability of the politicized activities of the so-called International Criminal Court remains unchanged. Accordingly, we see no point to having the representative of this puppet body, which openly serves the interests of Western state, to be present here in this chamber. The ICC has absolutely nothing to do with justice. The best illustration of the correctness of our assessment is the ICC's activities in Libya. Let us try to objectively assess it in terms of its contribution to the maintenance of peace and security, as the Security Council should be doing. The Council is no place for ritualistic rhetoric. Rather, it is a body with the tools and the mandate for practical action. We have all studied the ICC report on the situation in Libya and have learned that the Prosecutor's Office intends to finalize all lines of investigation by the end of 2025. Thus, the investigation of the situation has taken no less than 14 years. I cannot fail to recall that all of the activities of the Nuremberg Tribunal, which investigated the most large-scale and horrific crimes in the history of humanity, took less than 2 years from investigation to enforcement of sentences. Since the ICC's prosecutor's office has decided to wind down its work, it is worth taking stock and looking at what this court has in fact been doing in Libya all these years. First of all, there is the undeniable fact that 27 reports were submitted to the Council, the main thrust of which was to explain why the investigation was struggling. The Council devoted 27 meetings to their consideration. And throughout that time, the ICC's prosecutor's office has had 3 prosecutors. The Security Council referred the situation in Libya to the ICC in 2011 at the height of the conflict. The court, in a matter of mere days, issued arrest warrants for Gaddafi, his son, as well as his intelligence chief. Further inaction in Libya was usually blamed by the ICC on the difficult situation on the ground. Yet, in the midst of the conflict, it did not prevent it from acting quickly. As is well known, the ICC compensated for the lack of verified information by using fakes to bring charges. Not a single warrant was issued against the rebels, and this is despite the fact that with the assistance of the democratic bomber aircraft of NATO countries, Libya's statehood was destroyed. The crimes of other parties to the conflict, including the war crimes of the NATO coalition, were also of no interest to the ICC. One recalls that in order to perform this same trick, the infamous International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia established a special commission to assess NATO's actions. The ICC doesn't need such a commission because everyone there already knows that NATO is incapable of committing any crimes. I recall that the former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi was brutally murdered shortly after being declared wanted by the ICC, and the ICC investigators also turned a blind eye to this crime. Saif Gaddafi is still wanted by the ICC, despite the fact that he was already convicted by a Libyan court and released under amnesty. So in this case, the ICC has decided to ignore the principle of double jeopardy, or non bis in idem, which states that one cannot be prosecuted twice for the same crime. At the same time, the case against Libya's intelligence chief was dropped and dismissed as inadmissible because of a parallel trial in a Libyan court. 2 other accused members of al-Gaddafi's armed forces were killed. The bottom line for the Security Council should be the fact that the ICC has become complicit in the destruction of Libya's statehood and the impunity of the perpetrators of that crime, which has had serious consequences for the peace and security of the entire region. Since that time, the ICC's activity has essentially dwindled down. In order to avoid admitting to its inaction, the so-called court informed the Council that it had begun investigating potential crimes against humanity committed against migrants and refugees. 2 aspects are interesting in this regard. First of all, the reason for the flow of migrants out of that country is the destruction of Libya's statehood. Second, according to Western NGOs, the main responsibility for crimes against migrants lies with EU states and the EU border agency Frontex, which organizes the interception of distressed asylum seekers in the Mediterranean and their forceful return to Libya. The ICC has received requests from these NGOs to investigate European migration agencies and their activities in the Mediterranean, but instead the ICC Prosecutor's Office is investigating crimes against migrants in cooperation with the Eurojust-based Joint Investigative Team, and has even joined that team. There is an obvious conflict of interest here. After all, the ICC, pursuant to its statute, has to verify that European investigations are in line with the principle of complementarity. Is that not so, Mr. Khan? But instead of carrying out such an assessment, the ICC has joined the investigation without hesitation, as if European investigators needed capacity building and the ICC was a technical assistance body for wealthy countries. Yet we are talking about investigations into the deaths of thousands of migrants, violence, kidnappings, and most importantly, the deliberate inaction of European states when it comes to migrant boats in distress. In this situation, it is not surprising that the investigation, which has been underway for 7 years, is not yielding any results. Mr. President, last year, the issuance of 4 sealed warrants was announced in relation to the situation in Libya. A reasonable question arises: from whom and why were these warrants kept secret? The court could have prepared a classified report for Security Council members only, or could have communicated that information in a closed session. After all, the Council has all the tools it needs to work with classified information. The people sitting here are not professors who theorize about impunity, but rather delegations that should be dealing with the practical aspects of a peace settlement. How can information of such importance to the peace process be kept from the Council? Who exactly were these accused? What forces do they represent? Were they involved in the peace process in Libya? All these are far from idle questions. They are directly related to the Council's implementation of its mandate under the UN Charter. The ICC's keenness on sealed warrants also raises concerns in terms of guaranteeing a fair trial, since the names of the persons declared wanted by the prosecutor's office often become known only after their deaths. And finally, secret warrants are an extremely useful tool not only for imitating vigorous activities, since allegedly the individual is responsible for everything already dead, they're also useful for interfering in the peace process. After all, we all know who holds the remote control for this so-called court. Mr. President, in his most recent report, Mr. Khan once again complains about a lack of funding for the Libyan file. So where then have the tens of millions of dollars that Western states recently contributed to the ICC gone? They publicly stated that they wanted to pay for the unlawful investigation into Ukraine. But Mr. Khan tried to convince everyone that this is not about justice made to order. Allegedly, those generous donations from the West would go towards all the situations on the court's docket. So how does one explain the lack of funding on the Libyan track? I would also like to know if the U.S. voluntary contribution to the ICC budget goes towards investigating the situation in Palestine. Mr. President, double standards and utter politicization are not a unique characteristic of the Libyan file. They permeate the entire work of the ICC. Particularly illustrative is its continued inaction against the backdrop of the tragedy unfolding in Gaza. Let us recall that the ICC has been conducting a preliminary examination of the situation in Palestine since 2015 and has been conducting a formal investigation since 2021, yet it has accomplished nothing over these 9 years. In this regard, one wonders if the effectiveness of the ICC on this track is affected by the fact that a new bipartisan bill has been submitted to the U.S. Congress to sanction ICC officials involved in investigating not only the U.S. but also its allies. On April 29th, the Speaker of the House of Representatives explicitly called on the U.S. administration to immediately and unequivocally demand that the ICC stand down and use every available tool to prevent such an abomination, and that was a direct quote. It should be recalled that just recently, Congressmen praised the ICC's investigation of the situation in Ukraine and even hastily amended the legislation that prohibited cooperation with the ICC in order to be able to directly pay for the made-to-order trial against Russia. Now it seems that the legislation will have to be amended once again. Mr. President, we can thus see that the ICC is a political tool in the hands of the West. It does not promote reconciliation. On the contrary, it is actively hindering the peace process by trying to influence the parties in the interests of its Western masters. In other words, it is doing anything but implementing Resolution 1970. 13 years of failure and imitation of activity on the situation in Libya are enough to confirm that the ICC is not only useless when it comes to resolving the Libyan crisis, but that it is outright harmful. The Council should finally recognize that referring the Libyan file to the ICC was a mistake that should not be repeated. It must take the long overdue decision to withdraw the situation from the court. That would ensure progress in the political process on the basis of a national consensus of all social and political forces, which, in turn, would be more in line with the mandate of the Security Council than listening to the meaningless reports of the Prosecutor's Office of this puppet institution. We are convinced that the ICC's effectiveness should not be assessed by the number of visits, meetings, or offices that it opens. It will also not be assessed based on the rhetoric of Mr. Khan and his eloquence. The international community does not have another 14 years for the ICC to exercise its insistence on staying in a country where it has not accomplished its goals. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Mozambique. Distinguished Council members, Mozambique wishes to thank Mr. Karim Ahmad Khan, Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, for his important briefing. We welcome the presence of His Excellency the Permanent Representative of Libya in this meeting. Colleagues, pursuing accountability for the most serious crimes under international law is a matter of great priority to the international community as a whole and to the Security Council in particular. This is the reason why the Security Council referred the situation in Libya to the ICC through its resolution 1970 of 2011. In this context, we welcome the significant progress outlined in the report of the Prosecutor of the ICC with regard to progress made in the 4 key lines of inquiry defined. We welcome in particular the outlined roadmap for the completion of the investigation phase of the ICC's activities in relation to the situation in Libya by the end of 2025. Mindful of the complexity of the investigation of international crimes, we underscore the need for the ICC to expedite its efforts to deliver tangible results for the Libyan people by completing investigations so as to surrender the alleged perpetrators of crimes to a fair, independent, and impartial trial. The transition to the judicial phase prior to the end of 2025, set out in the roadmap, is an important step towards the conclusion of the cycle of accountability. We strongly believe that the victims of the horrendous crimes committed on the Libyan territory deserve justice. As such, the delivery of justice must be part of the healing process of victims and those affected. It must not serve to perpetuate the suffering of the people of Libya. It is our view that the Libyan people have endured significant challenges over the years. Their pursuit of truth, justice, and reparations is crucial for the healing and rebuilding processes. The Libyan people deserve to know that the international community stands firmly with them in their quest for justice, truth, and reparations. To this end, cooperation plays a pivotal role. The positive engagement of the Office of the Prosecutor with the Libyan authorities, as outlined in the report under consideration, is highly commendable. The recent visit by the Deputy Prosecutor of the ICC to Libya, our meetings with the Attorney General of Libya, other national authorities, victims, groups, and stakeholders, as well as the regular meetings of the Office of the Prosecutor with the civil society organizations and human rights defenders, offer a good example of vital actions to the fulfillment of the prosecutor's mandate in line with Resolution 1970. We therefore encourage the Office of the Prosecutor and the Libyan authorities to continue working in partnership in line with the principle of complementarity enshrined in the Rome Statute. In this regard, we welcome the launch of the new police paper of the Office of the Prosecutor on complementarity and cooperation. We hope that its implementation will bring tangible results in relation to accountability processes in different countries, as envisaged in the report. Mozambique encourages the Office of the Prosecutor in its effort to ensure accountability, justice, to uphold the rule of law, and to contribute to peace and stability in Libya. It is our firm belief that justice in Libya must not be delayed. I thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of Libya.
Mr. President, allow me to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Council this month. I wish you all success. We thank Mr. Karim Khan on his briefing and his 27th report that we took note of. We align ourselves with the statement of Algeria, especially what the representative has said. The situation in Libya today cannot be looked at in isolation from the magnitude of foreign interferences in my country and their direct effect on my country for around 14 years. Mr. President, at a number of occasions, we welcomed the efforts by Mr. Khan since he became prosecutor. He was committed to visit Libya, him and his team, many times, as part of the existing cooperation between the ICC and Libyan authorities. The latest of these visits was a meeting between Deputy Prosecutor of the ICC with the Attorney General last month. This meeting was based on information exchange and enhancing cooperation to investigate the atrocities committed in general and the crimes that were committed in Tarhuna and the massive mass graves that were discovered there specifically, in order to ensure complementarity between national judiciary and international judiciary. We stress that justice on Libyan soil is a sovereign duty. It is our jurisdiction. The Libyan judiciary is committed to ensure fair trials for all those who are suspected, no matter how long it takes. The crimes committed are not subject to a statute of limitation according to the Libyan Penal Code. We stress once again that our cooperation with the ICC, according to its mandate, is complementary to national judiciary and is never a substitute thereof. Mr. President, we have followed with great interest the briefing of Mr. Khan. It referred many times to international challenges, global challenges, and it included wishes, and he urged parties to provide support in order to enforce the law. But today, I'm speaking to you in a more realistic way, in light of what my country is going through. We have been following what the 27th report has contained, which is the 6th report by Mr. Khan. The report mentioned a strategy based on 3 tracks. The first track is investigating the crimes in detention facilities, then the crimes related to operation between 2014 and 2020, and third, the crimes committed against migrants. So, we have some remarks and some questions regarding what the report contained. And I hope Mr. Khan would be able to respond to these remarks. First, the report indicates, and I quote, the Office of the ICC seeks to complete the investigations in these tracks before 2025 and then prepare a trial regarding arrest warrants issued by the chambers during the investigation phase. And then, when the investigation phase is completed in 2025, the office will not issue more arrest warrants. And here we ask, does that mean that after all these years, after all these investigations, after all these visits, the field visits by your team, after all these evidence and cues that you possess according to your reports, and I'm not speaking about you specifically, Mr. Khan, about your tenure. I speak of your institution, the ICC, that started its work around 13 years ago. Does that mean that we will not see any tangible results that are commensurate with the crimes until the end of next year? Are Libyans now forced to wait? We actually expected tangible results after all this time. We saw that results were achieved at record speed in a number of other international cases. So why is it so slow in the case of Libya? Second, the report indicates, and I quote once again, as part of the roadmap, the office will proceed to one trial at least before the ICC before the end of 2025. This will be followed by multiple trials in the judicial phase. And once again, we're surprised. The assumption of this one trial by the ICC, as if it was a natural result, without indicating that national judiciary will actually proceed with this crime with this trial if circumstances allow. Does that mean you will determine who are the suspects and these suspects will appear before the court? So this also needs explanation. Third, the report refers to, and I quote, the roadmap determines a number of activities for beyond 2025. They can be carried out to provide a long-term support legacy. End of quote. We understand that the ICC would like to continue its work for years ahead, as if the strategy implies that it will continue indefinitely. We believe that this is illogical, and this goes beyond the mandate of the ICC, as if its role is to build capacities. There's no clear references to whether Libya would want that or no. Mr. President, the issue of mass graves discovered in Tarhuna has become one of the worst atrocities in Libya in modern times. It is regrettable that those involved in this horrific crime have not been determined yet by the ICC, despite the fact that the team visited this site many times and they have evidence, they have cues, they cooperated with the Office of the Attorney General, but so far there hasn't been any arrest warrants issued against the suspects, especially suspects that fled to outside of the country, although the Attorney General has issued arrest warrants against them. What is truly regrettable, and I hope Mr. Khan can provide an explanation, maybe it's just a misunderstanding. This report completely omitted the crimes committed in Tarhuna as a matter under investigation. For example, paragraph 42 on the crimes committed between 2014 to 2020, we saw that there is no reference to investigations in the mass graves in Tarhuna or the Tarhuna crimes as they were referred to in the past. And this also applies to the 26th report, although the crimes in Tarhuna have been mentioned in reports numbered 19 to 25. Also, Mr. Khan, you presented these crimes in your briefings as a priority, but in your last priority, they were completely omitted. While you referred to a number of crimes under investigation, naming the cities and naming and describing the crimes that were committed in these cities. But there was no mention to the Tarhuna crimes in your roadmap or in your strategy. Does that mean that this case was closed by you and investigations have been completed, that you have determined those involved and those who sponsored those involved? We ask for clarification, because in this case, we believe that Mr. Case, at the very least, if you don't give the utmost priority to this case, despite all the evidence, what is the point of Libya remaining under the tutelage of the ICC when there's a crime that is so clear as the crimes of Tarhuna? We believe in the importance of international law and international humanitarian law. However, Libyans are wondering, what have you provided to us? Where are the results? After 13 years, 27 reports, dozens of visits, hundreds of clues and evidence. For 13 years, after 2011, only one name was determined, and this person was killed. We have to wait for 14 years, so till next year, and we don't know what are the names of the suspects and how are they going to be held accountable. These are questions asked by all Libyans. Mr. Khan, if the case in Libya is so complex and the evidence that condemn the suspects are hard to get, and you use the passive voice all the time, isn't it better to allocate your resources and your efforts to what is more clear and what is easier, and that is broadcast to you live? Mr. Khan, I'm talking about Gaza. I'm talking about the genocide and the grave violations, the crimes, the war crimes that have been perpetrated for 7 months in Gaza before your eyes. The world expects you, Mr. Khan, to prove the point of this ICC, expects you to be courageous and to issue arrest warrants against the officials of the Israeli regime who have repeated again and again that they want to commit genocidal actions against Palestinians. The world wants you to discover those involved in the mass crimes against children, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing perpetrated in the Holocaust of the 21st century, the Gaza Holocaust. What are you waiting for, Mr. Khan? The world is wondering, do you need more evidence? Do you need more clues? Don't you see the threats against civilians, the potential threats against civilians in Rafah and the massacre that could happen at any time? This is the actual test of the ICC. Is the ICC politicized, or is it independent and neutral? Because its independence have always been called into questions, and now it is actually at stake. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency, the permanent representative of Libya to the United Nations, for his statement. Now I will give the floor to Prosecutor Karim Khan to respond to questions and the comments made. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The opportunity to respond is a blessing and a curse, but I thank you nonetheless. If I may be indulged and respond first to my friend, the permanent representative, my brother, the permanent representative of Libya. The starting point in terms of my term is what I said in my first briefing. I think it's quite obvious that Security Council referrals cannot be a never-ending story. They're not an exercise of action or a fig leaf. They require focus to demonstrate that in the real world, the law can provide shelter for people that very often have no shelter and are exposed to the elements of hate and division, tribalism, sectarianism, or outside interference. And that gave rise to the strategic plan and the report that has just been presented, which is a roadmap and of how we can close the investigative stage. And I had the great benefit, and I'm very grateful for my friends time, I spoke to him this morning, and he's quite aware as well that the meeting between the Deputy Prosecutor and the Attorney General was productive and effective. Also the fact that as an officer of the court, I'm bound by certain judicial decisions, and I can't speak on certain issues and for the activity, but I've said, and he knows exactly what I'm talking about, that there has been activity on a number of case files over this period. I'm not misleading the Security Council in the report when I say that there has been demonstrable, clear action in this situation. In terms of the issue of forced wait, no, I mean, nobody wants, apart from victims, tangible results more than the court, because I accept that international justice, the international architecture is under siege, and we have to prove it has value and that we have the stamina to move forward even if the sun is not shining and even if there's a storm around us. And this is exactly what the men and women of the office are doing. The goal of closing the investigative stage by the end of next year is based upon where we are, what we've done, and the new approach. Of course, if we have more things that I can announce, I will not wait. But certain issues are either subject to judicial orders or they require more cooperation from Libya. And we're not running down the sand. We're not running down the timer for any extraneous purpose. In terms of the goal of initial proceedings, because there's a whole process, the goal is simply because we are trying to improve and work with the registry as well, to improve tracking and arrest warrant execution across a range of situations. The hope is that initial proceedings can take place by the end of next year. Now, whether that is realized or not is not down only to me. It requires a community of support from this Council, from Member States of the United Nations, by state parties, and of course by Libya itself. Because, of course, nobody should care for the Libyan victims more than Libya. And so this is very much a cri de coeur to work together to fulfill an international legal obligation which has been imposed by the Security Council in 1970, in Resolution 1970. It's not an optional extra. It's hard law by dint of Chapter 7, and it requires certain obligations in terms of that. And, of course, if and when initial proceedings take place, any individual, party or state can file any admissibility challenge. So in terms of locations, yes, I've said very publicly in this council room from Tripoli that I've been to Tahuna, and we are looking at a range of situations. We're moving forward, and I am very alive, I'm very cognizant of the legitimate views and concerns of victims, the fact that so many people in Libya, from east and west, from all communities, have suffered so much for many reasons. I think we have the bandwidth and sophisticated understanding to realize all the drivers, but I'm driven by the Rome Statute and the need not to spout hot air, but to make sure that the law applies with more effectiveness, realizing that international law is very imperfect and there's been a very imperfect application of the law over many decades. But it's not an excuse for us not to do more and to do better in Libya and elsewhere. So that's my response. In terms of the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation, I was very pleased and grateful for his kind concern over the pressure that that has been placed on me or the office or the court. And I want to reassure him that in terms of threats against me personally, against the office, to stand down, to cease and desist, we will not be swayed, whether it's by warrants for my arrest or the arrest of elected officials of the court by the Russian Federation, or whether it's by other elected officials in any other jurisdiction. We have a duty to stand up for justice, to stand up for victims, and I'm fully cognizant that there are Goliaths in this room. There are Goliaths with power, with influence, and we are an international organization that are international servants, and we have something called the law. All I can do is say that we will stand up to the best of our ability. We will stand up and apply the law with integrity, with independence. We are judged either by judges, if there are warrants, by God, or by history. And that applies to me, of course, as much as anybody else. But we are not going to desist, and I welcome no state that is on the right side of history, that is a custodian of the United Nations Charter, should feel they have a privileged position to play fast and loose with the United Nations Charter or with the international work of the International Criminal Court. And I welcome support from any quarter, including the support that was expressed by the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. I hope we have more of that, no interference in the work of the ICC. Thank you so much, Mr. President, for the opportunity to say a few words.
I thank the Prosecutor General of the International Criminal Court, Mr. Karim Khan, for his additional clarifications. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers for today. This meeting stands adjourned.